So basically, when I went ahead and created a link from in landing and staging, so the row ID to row ID matched. It's basically we utilize for load by row ID. So you remember we talked about load by row ID part, that there are two types of loading techniques, right?
Right.
One is load by row ID and the other one is a regular load, right?
Correct.
So in that case, what happens is, so this row ID object is, if it is null, then it will take the primary key source and the source system. To fetch the data, if the data is there or not, for address. Okay.
Okay.
Whereas, correct.
So this row ID object, I think you mentioned this will be generated inside MDM, right?
Right. So if there is any
But
update, so if a
okay,
row ID object, the value is null.
okay,
Okay. So any data, if you are trying to, for the first time, the data which we are trying to load into MDM, this attribute will be null for all the records.
okay,
Later part of the day, when the data is coming again, if the data is already existing, it is coming for an update. So we can use the row ID object directly to update that particular data.
okay. So is it something like, I mean, before coming to landing with some lookup or anything, it will fetch the row
Correct,
ID object from base
correct,
object?
correct, correct.
Okay,
So it is an ETL. With in the ETL, we go ahead and we fetch the row ID object from the base object for that particular data. If we
okay,
find out that data,
okay,
okay. And
okay.
the part for the lookup which we gone ahead and configured in the staging.
So Ajay, just before going to that, so what about the party table we created then? I don't know because we don't there was no party ID column in it. So
So we don't
was
had
that
the party ID column. It is in the address. Both the mappings are for address.
yeah, these two, yeah, correct.
Right.
So when we're creating a party, I mean in the model that was shared, I don't see party ID column there.
Okay. So
So it should,
party ID will be there for every table. So I
okay,
just didn't added it because it's by default when we go ahead and create. So do you want to use party ID? You want to use any other name for that? So it is all good
okay.
because we have already shared in the ER diagram that these tables are connected with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when we say connected, that means there would be a relationship attribute for that purpose.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
And over here, this party ID will go over here, the primary key source object, which we are trying to relate, that will go into the staging and the configuration which we created for staging table and address, right? This one we created, right?
Right.
So this value will be taken up and will be directly looked up so that
Okay.
it can fetch the row ID object for party.
Oh, okay. You mean now the relationship is created, but again, if you go to relationship, the relationship is created between party ID and row ID object, right?
Correct. But over here we are saying that look for this particular value in this table with this system name and fetch the row ID object from there. You remember when
Like,
we saw in the cross reference, there is a row ID xref and a row ID object, both.
right, got it. But again, I mean, I'm not sure if I am going in the wrong direction. Like, because
No, 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 no
this
issues.
is this is the party ID value, right? I mean, this column will be having the party ID value, correct?
It will be
And it will,
having the party's row ID object.
okay,
Okay. But from the landing, it will receive primary key source key, primary key for party table. Then it will look with that particular value. We set up a lookup, right? In ETL,
correct. Yeah,
correct? This is the lookup which we set up in the ETL to fetch a row ID object.
okay.
That look into this table, look for this particular column, look with this particular system, and look with the value which is coming over here, and fetch the row ID object for the same.
Okay.
Okay. So today you can see that settings is available for us. We just had this staging enabled, and now settings is enabled for both the tables, right?
Yeah.
So sometimes it takes time to refresh its database or metadata. I don't know why Informatica didn't went ahead and did a client level validation that if this is enabled, then setting needs to be popping up, else it should be disabled. So it's something like that, that it has to go ahead and refresh its metadata, and then only it will come up for us. Okay. So before we go into anything, we always do a write log. So now these things are there, right? So any other question before we move forward with the audit trail or delta detection, how we go ahead and create it?
Yeah, one more question.
Hmm.
This lookup tables we created, right? So there we, when we are creating that lookup table, we enable some a checkbox
Look up in,
stating that it's a lookup, yeah, lookup indicator.
right,
Uh,
in
and
advance.
yeah, right. So we can make reference to any table, right? I mean, to base object we are doing, but we are not enabling this thing over there, correct?
Correct. So between
So
lookup and base object, this is the main difference. Second
yeah,
difference is we don't always allow history to be enabled unless and until certain number of lookup or reference entities we will be manipulating in the MDM itself. So if we are doing that, then only we enable the history. Otherwise, we don't enable history.
so if we enable that particular option, right? I mean, if we enable it or not, there a reference can be made to any table, right? Whether it is lookup or
Yes,
P or anyone. So if
correct.
we enable this thing, so does this have any other advantage or?
Yes. So it doesn't have any advantage, but it do have a functionality for this particular table. So when we will go into provisioning to that impact, we will see over there,
Okay.
because we have to create the UI for the people, right? In
Mhm.
that, for creating the reference entities, we need the lookup indicator to be enabled. Only those base objects where lookup indicator is enabled, only those we will be able to see.
Okay. Fine. Sure.
Yeah. So in the audit trail, let me just quickly open the SQL developer as well. So yesterday we saw that for the staging table, we only have two different tables. One is staging table and the other one is reject table, right? Okay, I think when we go ahead and we enable the platform staging, all these four tables are now being created directly. In 10.1, that was other way around. So when we go ahead and enable these options, only at that time, these tables used to be created. But in 10.4, these table comes up, these three tables. So this raw table is utilized for auditing, and these two tables are utilized for delta detection. Okay. So what is the difference between a audit and a delta detection? Delta detection will hold your data for the last load, whereas audit holds the data according to the configuration which we create over here. Okay.
So this row table, it will be having all the records till loaded. I mean the entire history or
The
the
audit
records of
table.
are received.
Yes.
Yeah.
So audit table, you can see that there are two options. So when we enable it, either you can use it according to loads, that for how many last loads you want the data to be stored in the raw table, which is coming from landing. Okay.
Okay.
So
Okay.
let's say if I just go ahead and say 10 loads of data, so only last 10 loads, it will store it. Whereas if I want to store the data according to time, then there are these many options to store the data. So it has its own usefulness as well as its inward effects on the database. So let's say if I went with a year and I just say for 1 year, or I would say just 2 years, and I have another mechanism for going ahead and deleting the data after my entire financial year's audit is being done. But in a year, every day, if you are having a full load and you haven't enabled the delta detection, and you have, let's say, 1 million record. So a million record is coming in, or let's say 1 lakh record you are having, 0.1 mil. So how much data it will be storing? How much the data will be there in the raw table? It would be 365 lakh, which means 36.5 million record, right? What it will do? Somehow it will be an adverse effect on the database memory, right? So if we are doing these kind of things, then we should, so the recommended step is to always enable delta detection, either in the ETL side or in the MDM. So when we enable the delta, what does that mean? If we are having a full load, only the data which is being modified will be going into staging layer. Which means if I have 1 lakh record And in that, every day there are only 30 or 40 records which are getting updated. Only those 30 or 40 records will be going into audit table. So it might sum up to a million or a little bit more, but not as many as 36.5 million records. Do you agree on that? Every day I won't be updating all the records. I'll be just getting updated like 1% of the record which are there, right? And not even 1%. There might be less. Correct? So that is where delta detection comes into handy. Now, when we enable delta detection, there are options which are there. So first thing is by comparing all the columns in the mapping, which means any single attribute is changed, then the data needs to be processed. Second option is with date. All the date attributes will be shifted over here. If you have user created, system created, any attributes, all those attributes will be over here. So you can select that particular option and we'll say according to the date columns. Or if we want using specific attributes, then we go ahead and use that accordingly. So we can use like this. So only on user defined attributes, only if the value is updated over here, then only we can say that the data is being updated. So that is what delta detection does for us. By back supporting tables for these are PRL and OPL. Okay. So that is what audit and delta detection stands for in MDM. Last option is if the data was duplicate. That means if the data which was being loaded earlier without any changes, if that particular data comes back again, if we want to go ahead and allow it next time, then we allow this checkbox. Otherwise, we don't allow to pass through that particular data. Okay. Any questions for delta detection and audit trail?
So for we have selected these columns, right? I mean in the delta detection, if you're going ahead with specific columns, still, how the records are being computed? I mean, is it based on the row ID object only? It will pick the row ID object, and for that particular row ID object, it will check in both these tables for these columns.
You
Is
know,
that the way it works?
audit table is just load
Not
every
audit,
day.
and
Delta
I'm
detection,
asking. Yeah, yeah.
for delta detection, those attributes are there. So it will check if this particular data exists over there or not.
Okay.
It will be having its primary key. It will be having its system attribute, right?
Yeah,
Sources.
yeah, that's what I'm asking. I mean, is it based on the row ID object? Each row is considered, or the primary key what we are using
Primary,
for the table? Okay.
primary.
P key.
Yes.
And the last option, right, that allows staging if prior duplicate was rejected. So these rejected records will be identified from that reject table, and those will be allowed in the next turn if we are enabling this.
So there are two tables, right? One is OPL and PRL. So any
Correct.
data which is not gone through will be stored over here, and the data which is gone through will be
Oh,
over
okay.
here. So any data which, if we are allowing, then it would be checking in these tables accordingly. Okay.
Okay.
So now on towards queries. Are we clear with the staging table?
So, Ajay, you told right that OPL table, what we are not allowing, it will go to OPL table, right? So those are the rejected records, or I mean, for what reason they are going to OPL table?
Those two tables are actually there for holding that particular data. So the last load which came in,
Yeah,
because
PRL, it will hold the data which was proceeded to
previous,
staging last time, right?
correct, it's previous landing table.
Okay, fine. Then this OPL,
And OPL is basically the data which is being sent. OPL is utilized with the table basically going ahead, and you can say it works with the audit table, that okay, this particular data was being sent and how it was being sent, what was the table which went in. So according,
What's the difference between this OPL and PRL table? Like
OPL
data
and
from
PL,
landing would be going into both the tables and then, or it will be going basically into the OPL table from after landing, and then it will do the delta detection and all that. And once it is the data which is moving into uh, say for staging or layer, that would be moved to PRL, or how is
it
it?
would be first going into PRL table. It checks the PRL table afterwards and then sends the data to OPL and staging table.
Okay, so basically this delta detection happens on PRL table. I mean,
Correct.
once the new data is there, then after that it will basically internally it will check for, like, based on the settings what we have enabled, it will check for the delta.
Right. So whenever there
So that
is,
means in PRL there can be duplicates also. I mean, because like if primary key,
no,
P key source
it
is
won't be
same, right?
duplicate. It will
Then
be only storing the data which came in last time. So if the
it's a
data is
consistent.
matching, everything is matching. So it's something like you can say 10 records were there. Okay, these 10 records came in. Next time, in these 10 records, this G was not there and G was updated to, let's say, K. Okay, so these 9 records will not go anywhere. Okay, and only K will pass to staging. This will only go to staging. Okay, and this entire data will be checked over here, and the data which is not there, which means K will also get added over here. Okay, so next time, if let's say the G also comes in, so it won't go ahead and load any data from over here to staging table. Only the new data or with the data which is getting updated will be sent.
So basically, like it will kind of do a minus or check between PRL and the landing table, and then whatever is new that would be marked, and it would also getting be added into PRL, just the basically the delta parts.
You can
And
say it might be
same
the background query which they are running, but delta
okay,
detection is running over onto this configuration which we just chose. If it would be only for the date, then only the date attribute for that primary key will be checked. So it all works with the primary key and the date, if the date is present or not, is updated or not. If you are choosing all the attributes, then all the attributes for all the tables will be taken up. Then it will be checked for delta, that any difference it had came or not. If you are stating for specific attributes, then for that particular primary key, all these specific attributes will be summed up and then checked as a exact.
okay, okay. So it would be primary key source, P key source. On
Correct.
that only everything would happen.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, okay, good. And this PRL, it will have our entire data, right? I mean, based on that preserve thing, or it will already have everything, all the data, like from day one.
Correct. So as
Okay.
PRL is previous landing table, OPL is online previous landing table.
What is the use for like a OPL table as well? Because PRL happens like it will help to do the delta detection
Correct.
and also saving the data. So, what is the use for OPL table?
OPL table is utilized for, so basically these two tables, OPL and PRL, they work in together.
Okay.
Okay. First, the data would be sent to OPL table. PRL is holding your last load, previous load, right? And OPL is holding your current load. It checks the data between these two tables according to the configuration which we created, and only pass the attribute or the data which is being sent to staging. So let's say we went ahead, created a mapping, and in that particular mapping, we stated that CRM data only, but the landing is having the data for SAP and CRM both, right?
Yeah.
So what OPL will hold? OPL will only hold the CRM data, and PRL will be holding the last landing data which was there for CRM. This one is current, this one is last load. Then these two actually work together to find out what is distinct or what the data is being updated or what is the delta from that particular system.
So basically, the comparison is made between OPL and PRL,
PL and PRL,
not
correct?
not between landing and PRL. Okay.
No.
Oh, okay.
And OPL would be a truncate load or
Both of these tables are truncated. So once this comparison is done, and let's say there are 10 records which came into picture which was being updated. Once this data will be sent to staging table, this OPL table will send the entire data to PRL after the process. So what it would be holding, so let's say PRL was holding the data as 100 data it was holding. New data which came into landing was 110, let's say. Only inserts were there, no updates were there. Okay. So from these comparison, it actually went with 10 records to staging. Correct?
Yeah. Basically 100 old and 10 new inserts. Okay. So
Correct.
10 got selected. Yeah.
10 got selected. Then later on, what OPL does is OPL will hold the data with 110 records. These 110 records will be sent to PRL table, and the PRL will be updated with 110 records. Then next time when the landing will be sending the data back again, this data will get and load, and then it will check between this table and this table.
Okay.
So next
So
time, yeah,
yeah,
go
so
ahead.
go ahead, complete.
Yeah. So next time, let's say in landing, those 110 data was there, but there were 5 updates. Okay.
Hmm.
So OPL will be holding the new data from the landing, correct? So these 110 records will be updated over here. And the PRL was holding this data, right? So
Old
again,
100.
the comparison will be made on these. So the 5 updates will be sent to
Staging.
staging, and this 110 records with the 5 update will go into PRL.
Yeah. Okay. And what if like from the source we are getting a delta, I mean an incremental load. So we'll have in ETL, we'll have to maintain a full load kind of thing and then use it for landing, or the
Correct.
landing is basically always considered to have a full load, right?
Correct. Not
Okay.
always. It's basically the design of that particular ETL from the source. So one is use the same mapping which was being delivered for first load or initial load. We call it first or initial. Anything we can go ahead and state. So in initial or first load, what happens is the entire data from that particular source system is being shifted to MDM, whatever the data is there. So sometimes what happens is you can say lack of information or lack of showcasing which is the updated record. If the source is not able to send those parts, so we cannot find out what is the delta. So rather than going ahead and finding out the delta in the ETL, we can use the method over here. So in this case, what happens is the source is sending you the data, the entire data every day. They are saying that you go ahead and find out what is the latest or any changes which is there. So to handle the situation, there are 2 choices. First choice is to enable ETL staging layer. So ETL staging layer means that you go ahead, you dump that particular data into a single table. Let's say you are using the ID key. Okay. So what you'll do, you'll create a new table, and in this table, you'll load the entire data which is coming through. Then in the mapping itself, this particular table, you'll just go ahead and do a delta in the ETL that, okay, on all these attributes, what is the updated records? Okay. And you fire a minus query with all attributes linked, concatenated to each other. In a proper way. So how that actually is being done? So you'll do a join with Peaky with older one and the newer one. So let's say this was yesterday's data. Okay. And then in the next column, it would be Peaky of current data. Okay. Then you'll have old data in one attribute and current data in second attribute. You do a exact. If there is any changes in the data which has been coming from yesterday's one and the new one, only those data or only those PKs you will be selecting, and those PKs will be going ahead for the landing table. This is something which we do from ETL. This is something which we will be doing in Delta, in the ETL itself. But if we don't want to do this way, then there is another way where we are utilizing the MDM for checking the delta itself. Okay. Now coming to second thing. Second choice is if the source itself is saying that they can send you the delta directly, then you'll create two mappings. Your first mapping will be for initial load, and your second mapping will be for daily loads. And in this, you will be getting the delta from the source. And sometimes what happens is the same mapping, due to certain reasons, the same mapping can be utilized because they are doing the truncated load in those tables. So you'll only get the data which is coming on the particular date. So these are the two ways: either enable the delta in the staging layer or enable the delta in the MDM. If the source itself is sending the data, then these might be two scenarios where you will end up with.
Right. So in the second scenario, actually, I have a question where like the source itself is sending a delta. So
Okay.
I will have like in the ETL, I will read the daily, maybe convert from file to table, and then so then in that it would be directly kind of sent into the OPL table and PRL
No,
table,
no.
and
Then we won't be enabling the delta in MDM. Why to do the same process again? Because if we are enabling the
right.
delta, we are slowing down the load, right? Because it will go
Correct.
ahead and do some kind of processing for that particular data, correct?
Correct.
So we won't enable the delta itself.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Mm.
And when this is the case and you don't want audit to be done, so if the customer itself says that we don't want to go ahead and do any kind of audits, okay, at that time what we do is we don't even create landing tables. If there is no need of audit or delta, because delta is being sent from the source itself and audit is not required. Then is there a need of landing table? No, because the landing will be shifting the data to staging. And why do we use these things? Because there might be a need of audit or delta near future, or there is a cleanse function which is standardizing the data. To standardize the data. Okay. If these two things are not there in your mapping, then don't create landing table. It's a waste of efforts.
But can we configure MDM without landing? I mean, can the process be initiated from staging?
From staging, so what your ETL will do, ETL will load the data directly to staging according to source, right? Because what all ETL you will be creating, all those ETLs will be created according to the source only, correct? You won't be dumping the data from all the source from one single pipeline. You will be loading the data from different ETL jobs, correct?
Okay. But this is doable, right? I mean, for an MDM process or project, we can direct,
Yes.
if you are loading the data directly to staging,
Yes.
that
So
is,
if
and
these
that's
two
completely
are
fine.
not your needed functionalities, then there is no need of landing table. There is no need of mappings to be created in MDM.
Hmm.
It's a waste of processing power with MDM. Because from landing till staging, what you do is, if I'll say, the data which is being sent to staging layer, what you are doing, either you are standardizing the data, right, via mapping, cleanse functions, utilization, correct, or you are creating audit tables for future reporting, correct, or you are trying to create delta, find out delta detection, correct. These things, plus what you also do is you check if the data is not having nulls for foreign key. You just check it that okay, whatever you are doing, because this check will reject the data in staging to load process. So you can check this particular data and hold that particular data if this data is not there in mapping, basically the standardization process. So we can left it out as well. So if you are not in need of these things, then is there a reason of going from this to this with these many hurdles, or none of it? So basically, if I'm not needing any of these things, then why should I use staging process? I shouldn't, right? Because my ETL will be getting the delta records. It is doing all the standardization over here itself. And as there was no need of audit or delta, then it can go ahead directly and send it to staging link. So just what extra step we have to go ahead and put is over here, check if the foreign keys are not null. That's it. Like in address, the party ID and country. These two attributes shouldn't be null unless we have gone ahead and configure that if even if it is null, go ahead and send it. So if we are doing all these things in ETL itself, then directly send the data to staging. Some of the people also call this architecture as modern architecture. Or MDM, where there is no landing is needed. Any confusion?
No, not for me.
Okay, because afterwards it will go for referential integrity, validations, and all the rejects which will be happening due to that, it will be all handled in from stage to base object, which is load process. Correct? Because this particular part is already being taken care of by ETL. So this process has already been there. We are already utilizing the time over there. So there is no point in utilizing the same thing in MDM as well. So it's basically a duplicacy of efforts by the tool, right? So by this, we can cut some time for loading the data. Okay. But for creating those, it's a great time which we go ahead and do. Because creating staging tables is a pretty quick task. But creating a landing and a mapping is a tedious task, right? Because let's say you had around 15 tables to go with, and in each table you had 40 attributes. So that many tables with those many attributes, you have to create landing first. Then you have to create the mappings for all those 15 tables with how many source systems you are having. So just imagine how much time you did reduced by not going with those things. So we were saying with 4 source, 15 tables, it already becomes 60 mappings. And every table will be having your data, or basically your attributes to be created. Right? And this architecture is being started from last 3 years. Why? Because from 3 years, company have started to understand their data. They started to value it that, okay, this data is how much important to them. and how they have to go ahead and govern it so that they'll be able to reduce the maintenance cost of it and to increase the revenue outcome from the data.
This delta detection, which one will be giving more performance if we keep it inside MDM or with the ETL? So
It depends on the source. If we are able to get the data, get the deltas from the source itself, there is nothing faster than that. But
no,
if
I'm
we are
asking if you are using delta detection. Suppose
yeah,
we have to use it. So
with Power Center, it is way much slower than in MDM. But if we are utilizing the IDQ or any data quality tool or IICS, that kind of platform,
okay.
so they have increased the throughput by utilizing multi-threading and all those approaches, that the read which they are actually doing is going with multi-thread approach.
Mhm.
So due to that, it becomes faster approach in ETL,
Okay.
because this particular functionality is there from last, I think, 9.6 or 9.3 version. They have refined it in 9.8 or 10 version, but afterwards it's stable. They are not doing anything over here. So it's basically a technology or the queries or the functionalities which they have written from 6 years back or 5 years back, right?
Okay.
So that is why it is good, it is efficient, but it is not as faster as today's ETL process. Because ETL and data profiling tool have only one job: to pass through and to do all those operation, nothing else. So they are actually going ahead and trying to make it faster and faster and more efficient, and they do not try to lose their effectiveness. So that's why it is faster in the data profiling, which is IDQ, and the IICS. And that's why they went ahead and closed down the power center. They do not go ahead and sell any power center from last 1 year or close to 1 year now. They have stopped the power center directly itself. And they stated that by this year or by next year mid, they'll be stopping the support for that as well. And they are asking all their customer to move to cloud or move to IDQ. Because throughput from Power Center and DQ is almost multiplied by 4 times. At least, this is at least I'm saying, which I have seen. So in my past career, I have utilized Power Center as well. So from Power Center, I have seen a million record which was moving in from Power Center to landing table. We were having around 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes of just ETL task. But with DQ, all the million record were actually being shifted within 3.5 minutes. So that much difference I have seen with my own eyes.
Ajay, one doubt.
Yeah,
You said like the performance will be faster, right? When using profiling and IICS.
correct.
Like IISS is like we are replacing power center, right? It is
It is a mixture of DQ and Power Center.
DQ and Power Center. Okay.
Yes,
Data quality.
data quality and Power Center.
Okay. So I was not aware of this. Like DQ also be done in ISS. Okay.
IICS, they have they are not saying that you there is a separate tool. They have
Mm-hmm.
merged Power Center and DQ capabilities into IICS. You
Okay.
can do
Okay. Mm-hmm.
profiling, you can do scorecarding in IICS
Mm-hmm.
as well.
Okay. Okay. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay.
Profiling was not there in Power Center. Profiling is specialized for data quality.
Okay.
Scorecarding was specialized for data quality,
Mm-hmm.
which right now IICS can do it.
Okay. Got it.
So coming back to our thing. So these things are clear, right?
Yes. Yes.